All right. Good morning, commissioners. Welcome, and over to you, Chair Harrington.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March 12th Washington County Board of Commissioners work session. Please note, we do not have a Board of Commissioners meeting this week. We have a full agenda for today. The first item on the agenda is with our Parks Division Manager, Carl Schweitzer, with regard to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the Metzger Park Local Improvement District Advisory Board. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, staff. We are here today for your consideration of moving forward the recommended appointees to both the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board and the Metzger Park Local Improvement District. We have several vacancies, either through expired terms or midterm vacancies. Through the county's recent recruiting process, we got a number of quality candidates and enough to fill all of the seats on both boards. And we would like to move forward with those for a formal appointment, but I'm here today to ask if you have any questions, comments about the recommended appointees.
Thank you. Carl, where'd you find these folks? Man.
So through the county's recruitment process, we got many of the applicants. We went above and beyond in the Metzger Park Local Improvement District Advisory Board recruitment because we've historically had kind of a tough time finding candidates. It's such a small geographic area. We sent a mailing out in September of last year advising the people who lived within the local improvement district that the advisory board needed some members, and we got a few candidates through that. So we should have enough applicants to not only fill the voting member seats, but for the first time in many years, actually have one of the alternate seats.
Great.
So could we please just walk through each of the boards, please? So on page 5 of the packet, which is, well, I don't know, it's titled Park and Recreation Advisory Board at the top with a table.
Just to walk through the matrix.
So there are 7 vacancies. There are 9 applicants. So you have 6 that are in the applicants recommended for appointment. So where does the 7th come from?
Can you repeat that question? I'm not sure I followed that.
So I'm just looking at this table.
Yes.
And if I add up the number of folks here under the column applicants recommended for appointment, I see 6 people, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, excuse me, 5 people. So I'm wondering how many people are we
Thank you.
reappointing?
I think I understand your question. So there are a total of 9 seats. Working from the bottom up, it says current members. We're looking for reappointment of those 2 members. We have 2 members seeking reappointment that have expired terms. That would be Kim Jansen and Jeffrey Moxie. And then there would be 5 new appointees for a total of 9.
What am I looking at wrong?
Yes, because we have 2 current members.
And so this applicants recommended for appointment is 5.
Those are 5 new ones, plus these 2 here are people seeking reappointment.
Oh, so other applicants to be appointed.
Yes, so that would be a total of 7 plus the 2.
Okay, that it just said others, so sorry, I should get my mic. It just said others, so I couldn't find an explanation for that table. So thank you. That fills the 7.
Carl Fisher going to be reappointed? He's-
This particular matrix is for the Park and Recreation Advisory Board. For the Metzger
Now we're
Park,
gonna move to Metzger.
for the Metzger matrix, Carl Fisher is listed on there. And he is also seeking reappointment, yes.
Jump to John.
Is it important that he be called out as a member of the TVWD board? That's just,
No,
I just asked if it was important.
no, it's not.
Okay.
They're two separate advisory boards. He's elected to that. This is an appointment. There's
I
no,
was just surprised that it wasn't called out in his resume or in the description. That's all I'm saying for public awareness.
oh, he may not have included it in his application.
Right. That's why.
It is not in his application.
Okay, I'm all set with all these. Sounds like Commissioner Rogers is.
I am.
Great.
Good.
We'll see you at the business meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, onward to topic number 2, surprise, we're ahead of schedule. Welcome to Mira and Kristen. Do we have Stuart here as well?
He's on his way,
Oh, see, we caught him by surprise.
but I can represent.
Yes, of course you can. You're our subject matter expert on all things cat. We do have a third microphone today, so
Well, thank you, Chair Harrington. Good morning, Board of County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Mira Samantali, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services, and really I'm just here to introduce and turn things over to Kristen Burke, who's a project manager for our CAP project. I'm really excited to be here today to present building name proposals for your review, feedback, and then ideally an action item on April 16th. So I'll go ahead and turn things over to Kristen, move off to the side so that Stuart can step up when he gets here.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. I was going to do the presentation anyways with Stuart being here just in case there were questions from the facilities perspective, so this works fine. Today, we are going to be talking about the building names for the CAT. As we have talked about before, the CAT will occupy 2 different buildings, and one of the important steps is naming those buildings. So we're going to talk about the process that we use to come up with the recommendations of the names, and then solicit any feedback that you have for us to work on prior to the action item. So the CAT, as we've talked about, the Center for Addictions Triage and Treatment, will occupy 2 separate buildings. One is located in Beaverton, one is located in Hillsborough. The Beaverton building will have the more intensive services, the services that are residentially based, whereas the Hillsborough building is focused on outpatient services, more of the community type based services. The Evergreen building is a building that the county has actually owned and is being repurposed. This is a building that was priorly occupied by WACA, our 911 center. And so it's been referred to as a lot of different things throughout the build. It's been referred to as the WACA building. It's been referred to as the services building. So we really want to look at finding a name that distinguishes it as a building for the CAP project. The other building is a brand new building in the county inventory. And so it hasn't had a name, an official name for the county. It's a building that we've referred to as the Community Services Building through the build. Facilities calls it Elam Young Parkway South. One of the challenges with that is we have another building on Elam Young Parkway, and so it does get a little bit confusing to identify which one we're talking about. I want to just mention that we really looked at 2 different aspects of this when we went through the naming process. One was really reassessing the program name, CAT, and really kind of just doing a check to make sure that that really is the name we want to go with as a program. But then we recognize that a building name is really important as well. And so, and pretty much required and for facilities. The one thing that we really wanted to do is make sure that we are helping people get to the right building because we're having two different services in the different buildings. We want to use cues that help people get to the right building and know what services they're going to be receiving in the building. So the process that we used is starting with an internal work group with folks from facilities, from our PIO and HHS, as well as the CAT leadership team that's been working on the project throughout. We also had a representative from CODA who will be occupying the intensive services building or the building in Beaverton. And through that work, we really focused on identifying what criteria we would be using to develop the names. We then took the recommendations that we had to a larger group that included other representatives from facilities, also our public information officer for the county. And then we took the name recommendations to a couple community groups to solicit feedback to make sure that we were on the right track. So this is just a list of the criteria that we used as we were thinking about naming of the building. One of the things that was really important is to provide locational cues so that people, again, because there's two different buildings, how would they know which building they're in? Because they're in two different cities, that helped. We also really wanted to use this as an opportunity to continue to destigmatize behavioral health treatment. And so every opportunity that we have to really help people normalize recovery, normalize treatment, we wanted to take advantage of that. Another consideration that we had was wanting to be as consistent as possible with other county building names. And then there are restricted covenants on both buildings because of the grant funding that we used to purchase the buildings. We were required to have restricted covenants, which means that the buildings have to be used for recovery-oriented services throughout the next 20 years. So these are the name recommendations that we came up with that we'd like to hear your feedback on. The nice thing about using Beaverton Recovery Center and Hillsborough Recovery Center is that it really ties well with our existing Tigard Recovery Center, with both the locational cues, consistency, and really being broad enough that you can identify that there's behavioral health services in there. But if the services change over time, it's not tied to the building name. Recovery is a term that is widely used in the behavioral health community, and so it's very relatable to people who are seeking services. We did have two community feedback sessions. The first was with our Washington County Behavioral Health Resource Network, also known as the BURN. This is a collective of community-based organizations and individuals that received Measure 110 funding and have come together to form a network of services in our community. It's a well-attended group of people that have been meeting for a couple of years now. And typically we have 30, 35 people attending, and many of those folks are people with lived experience of having a substance use disorder. We also brought the name to our contracted network of treatment providers in Washington County to solicit feedback. Overall, the feedback around keeping the CAT name was really positive. That was very supported. People identify with it, they recognize it, they know what it is at this point. It's been very well socialized in our community. In terms of the building names, the feedback was a little more mixed. It was generally positive, but there were a lot of suggestions. People had lots and lots of suggestions about other names, often which were quite long, often included the word cat in it, often had feline references in it. But in general, there was a lot of support for using for the two buildings. And there wasn't anybody who said, no, don't do that. That's not a good idea. So with that, I'd love to hear some feedback from the board, reaction to the names, any additional steps you'd like us to take. And then if there's consensus to move forward with the names, we will come back in April 6th with an 16th with an action item to adopt the names.
So there are four of us today. Which of you three wants to go first? Feedback?
I was, as I read through this material, I don't know what I was expecting, but when I got to Beaverton and Hillsborough Recovery Center, it was like, well, that makes sense. And I thought it made sense, especially in relationship to the tiger case. So I'm supportive.
I have the same reaction. It's vocational. I don't understand though how the cat will be used. That name, you keep referring back to it, but this is said with great respect. Nobody knows what that means outside your service. If you said that to most communities, people on the street, they'd say, I don't know, is that the animal shelter? What are you talking about? So how is that going to be used?
Yeah, so the program names will continue to be the Center for Addictions, Triage and Treatment, and we will have that name to identify it. So CAT is for short, but the official name of the programs will be the Center for Addictions, Triage and Treatment. And that's really going to be an umbrella term used to refer to the collective of the services of the CAT. So we'll use it for social media posts, for outreach and engagement, all those sorts of things. The providers and the services within the CAT umbrella may change over time as the needs in our community evolve. So these are really just the names of the buildings, but when we're referring to the services, we will be referring to them as the Center for Addictions, Triage and Treatment.
I like the building names.
Thank you.
Yeah, same for me. I too was wondering, how are you going to retain? I saw in your materials that it was supported to keep the cat. So that was the question I had. So thank you for that answer. The other question I had is, I think you drilled the intensive care services or intensive services building. So that was drilled to me, and I sort of understood the Beaverton Recovery Center as the intensive. So how would you plan to keep that so that that is where intensive services are retained or received as opposed to community services? Because I sort of see that distinction. And while I like the name of the location, because location makes sense. Hey, if you're at the Beaverton, you go to the Hillsborough, you won't get lost. But how would you sort of not insinuate, but sort of let people know that intensive services are at the Beaverton Recovery Center versus the community services?
Yeah.
I could also see it called Intensive Recovery Center as a community recovery center. So I could see the same naming that way too, but.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've got a couple answers to that. One is we are just beginning to really develop a marketing campaign. This is one step, is to have the buildings names so that we can develop the logos, and then we can start developing the community outreach material and information. And our goal is really, like I said, to help people get to the right building. And at the same time, we want to have a no wrong door approach. So a lot of folks who will end up going to intensive services building will start at the community services building, because that's where our Hawthorne Walk-In Center that does the assessment and triage and connection into treatment. So our goal is that honestly, we will get people to the right service regardless of which entry they do. But we're also going to work on a marketing campaign with locational cues, with outreach, with all the information to help people understand which services are located in which building. The other aspect that we need to do is consider, how do we get our provider names incorporated and integrated into this as well? Because CODA will operate the Beaverton building solely. They're the only organization that will be in that building. We're also going to, and the services will be licensed under CODA's name. It's also going to be related to as a CODA building because of the licensure. And so that's one of the aspects, is when people are seeking services, they will identify CODA as a provider, and that site, the location will be listed under that service, if that makes sense. We are going to be doing a lot of strategy and marketing and outreach and development over the next year before we open.
And the other question I had, this is just being close to that area, especially the Beaverton one, not the Elam Young building. That area is tenants port area. And it's sort of, I think, associated as a Hillsborough. I know the.
Whoa,
attention
whoa,
will be-
back up. It's very confusing in that area. I lived with the locational confusion
Okay, I'm
my
not-
entire elected career. It is located in Beaverton. Part of Tannisbourne is in Hillsborough. Part of it's in Beaverton.
Mhm.
And Tannisbourne is a marketing name. It's not a licensed geographic place name.
Mhm.
So I totally identify with locational confusion.
So how would you address that? Sounds like I'm not the only one. The chair itself identified that. So have you encountered some of the community engagements and the conversations you've encountered? How would you address that?
You know, it's come up just a little bit where people are like, oh, I didn't know that's actually Beaverton. And then when we say, yes, it actually is, but if you cross the street, you're in Hillsborough. And then people laugh and they go, oh, okay, now I understand. And so it's really just going to be an educational event and making sure that we're really clear about the address. One of the things we did with the Hawthorne Walk-In Center is we created very simple little maps and that can be put on business cards and things like that, just to help people with the navigation to the site.
Thank you. I have a lot of feedback. Ms. Angie and Mr. Anderson, does the county currently have a policy on naming? It used to. I haven't heard anything about that in this process.
I don't think so.
Please check before the 16th or before there's board action. So, secondly, on, well, your slides, I don't see numbers. On the one that's actually titled community feedback, it's not community feedback. If you use our Washington County website, the burn is made up completely of providers, which is the same as substance use treatment providers, the second bullet. So it's really stakeholder feedback. So the kind of community member feedback that two of my colleagues have highlighted would come out if the general community had been engaged. Though I know through your CAT process that you've engaged a lot of community members in the nearby areas, but I don't know if you've engaged those folks in the naming process. So that's the second thing. Third thing, I'm really confused. I need for the presentation for the action to see slides that enumerate all the different names that are going to be used. And who cares about them? As a community member, to hear something referred to as the CODA building, why do I care that CODA is the contract operator? Because of insurance purposes? I mean, it's too confusing. I hear that CAT is the program name. Where in this did it tell me how the program name would continue to be used, right? The Tigard Recovery Center, if you search for it on our county website, you can't, the search doesn't come up with the Tigard Recovery Center. So am I to assume that the CAT umbrella is going to include all three sites? Right? So we need some clarity before we take action. I don't have a problem with the locational names. Okay, so knowing that there's a Tigard, a Beaverton, and a Hillsborough, not a problem at all, right? Because it's all about how do we make sure that the people in need get to the right place. And I understand that's your intention. Thank you. Right? It's all about how do we serve the people in our community. So in that regard, I get the details, right? But I'm confused in terms of different reference names. And I imagine that especially the different kind of providers will have a different naming association, like the Coda building, perhaps. You've really hammered into my head that the Beaverton site has residential services, which the Hillsborough site does not. But I sit here today unable to answer the question, what does the Tigard Recovery Center do? I think from past information, it's a really small setup, but I don't know that. And so how do we make sure that our general community members, like me, being a family member of someone suffering and now dead of substance use disorder, how do I know as a family member how to direct my loved one to one site versus another? Should I know that should I have an expectation once these are open that they can, my family member can get the same level of services at the Tigard building as the Hillsborough building or the Beaverton building? So that's where I'm not sure about the grand scheme of naming yet, though I'm totally in support of the lower level locational naming. So it's a real mixed bag, and I'm sorry, because I identify with your intent, but before I take action, I still have some questions. And I'm confident that you'll be able to pull that together before we take action. So that's why I'm still in support, but I need some further clarity, that's all. And back to the policy, we have naming done all over the place in this organization. And I know a naming policy used to exist. The board didn't always choose to follow it. And so I'm a little bit concerned about what I, as one of five, and as the chair, what questions from community I might have to answer. So, So let me just repeat, on the grand scheme of things, for these specific two new buildings. Oh, I forgot to mention Hawthorne. I expect Hawthorne Watkins Center, Crisis Mental Health Center kind of names will go away. Because as far as I know, the Hawthorne services will be moved into the Hillsborough Recovery Center building. And we don't need people to be confused, having a whole plethora of names. So that's the last question I forgot to share before I was trying to wrap it up. So I'll just leave it as there. And how many logos do you need to develop?
Well, we would have one logo that has the logo for the cat. And then our intent was to have a logo that had the cat logo with Beaverton Recovery Center and a cat logo with Hillsborough Recovery Center, incorporating the building names.
So it goes back to, when is a program name used and when is a building name used?
Right.
I'm just not clear on that yet.
Okay.
But I'm not trying to, I just want to act on what's appropriate.
Yeah, we will bring all of that back prior to action.
Oh, great. All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry.
No, we're
problems.
ahead of the game, Stuart, so not a problem at all. Okay, now we're really shaking it up here. We're moving on to our third topic, still 20 minutes early, holy smokes. And this is a big topic, the capital improvement plan. So welcome and please take it away.
Right. Well, good morning, commissioners. My name is Greg Munn. I serve as county CFO. And today's a pretty big day. I'm here with a few colleagues, which I'll introduce here in a couple of minutes. Well, this is Luke Ross. He's already here, so he's jumping the gun a little bit, but that's okay. He's so excited. Yeah. But I just
It's a pleasure to meet you.
I know. Nice to meet you too. I just wanted to give you, before we get rolling here, just a little bit of background. You all know this, but I thought for the public record, I would just reach back and talk about the last couple of years, where we've been, and where we are now in relation to that. So today we will be presenting to you a draft of the proposed 2024-2029 capital improvement plan. This is the second year of the comprehensive countywide plan, and it has evolved nicely from the first CIP that was approved by the board last June. But before we get into the details of the updated CIP, I'd like to share a bit of the history and the why behind the effort to develop a long-term capital improvement or investment plan. In July of 2022, the creation of the countywide CIP was identified as one of many needs on the county's budget process redesign work plan. The purpose of the budget process redesign work plan was to provide an overview of the relationship between the one-year financial plan, that'd be our annual budget that we're used to, and the developing longer-term strategic plan, which we're also talking about this. So it's the mechanical gap between those two that sort of essentially makes up the redesign work plan. The intent is to outline a work plan that will help us improve and strengthen that relationship while increasing transparency and a general understanding of the budget strategic plan relationship through a redesign of budget practices, fiscal planning methods, internal procedures, forecasting, and accounting techniques toward those considered best practices for local governments. A long-term plan to fund the county's capital assets, including maintenance, replacement, and new assets, was a component of that redesign work plan. Additionally, the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, recommends that, this is in quotes, local, state, and provincial governments establish a system for assessing their capital assets and then appropriately plan and budget for any capital maintenance replacement, end quote, including developing policies to guide capital asset management practices that are supported by both finance and operational/engineering expertise, to establishing condition/function performance standards to be maintained for each type of capital assets, 3, evaluating existing capital assets to determine if they still provide the most appropriate method to deliver services. 4, consider developing financial policies that identify and dedicate fees or other revenue sources to help maintain the expected service level of capital assets. 5, allocating sufficient funds in the multi-year capital plan and the annual operations budget for the condition assessments, determination, and reporting preventative maintenance, repair, renewal, and replacement of capital assets in order to continue the provision of services that contribute to the public health, safety, quality of life of the public. Monitoring and communicating the progress toward those stated goals is another one. And then at least every 3 years, providing a plain language report on capital assets to elected officials and made available to the general public. So those are the guiding principles off the GFOA website. And finally, the importance of a long-term plan to identify capital maintenance and improvement needs was further emphasized later that summer. This was 2022. That when, at the time, $48 million in immediate facility improvements were identified in some of our most critical areas of the county, and as planning commenced to replace our 20-plus-year-old enterprise resource planning system. These 2 immediate need projects alone will cost upwards of $85 million. The process developed the CIP will ensure that the county is better positioned in the future to identify, plan for, and fund this work in advance to ultimately provide consistent and stable services to the community. So with that,
I would like to add, thank you for that overview. It is anything but boring. This is incredible foundation building that, as you talked about with GFOA, is built on best practices in government, and I applaud that. By doing this, we are strengthening the financial basis for operation as a county government with a population of 600,000 and growing in 13 different cities in the second largest county of Oregon with a very diverse population and a large inventory of buildings, parking lots, parks, computer technology, and so forth. So this is exemplary foundation building. And I want to thank you, Ms. Angie, and other key leaders here as our management team for examining where we're at and setting us on a path. You mentioned the step we took last year and this very significant step we have before us today for completion soon to really provide a rock solid base. So thank you.
thank you. Appreciate the comment. So before I jump any further, I just forgot to show you, but this was last year's CIP. A reference point you can see. So this is this year's. This is the draft CIP we're reviewing today.
The difference is last year's CIP had just the bare bones, critical facilities, as you talked about, and laid the groundwork for the early stage for IT and very early stages for our transportation portfolio. Now you've expanded it to try and encompass the full umbrella of assets that qualify as the capital definition, hence the bigger document. Thank you.
And I wanted to point towards the team that has put this together. This has been a monumental, seems like too big of a word, but sometimes it felt that way. Lift, and I just get to sit here and talk about it, but most of the work was done elsewhere. And also the status of the CIP this year is further along than I expected. I didn't expect us to be this far along, so staff really went the extra mile. But I want to read out some names to you, and let's start with ITS, of course, Luke Ross here, and his team, Theme Grins, who's in the back, and Theme really acted as our theme. He didn't want me to do that, but Theme was our quarterback, and he kept us going, and it's really, so I applaud you for that. Kia Sunberg, also from ITS, Yua Tan, Wayne Flynn, Kevin Babbitt, Destiny, Olivas Fogarty, and Dan Spraker, all from ITS. Our facilities, Fleet and Parks, Laurel Brown and her team, including Missy Hughes, Debbie Valerie, Bassam, okay. Actually,
No pressure, Greg.
yeah. I started to panic there because I actually asked how to pronounce. I just know you as Bassam. Bassam's been great, and Brian Robb from LUT, Stephen Robertson, his team, including Cindy Downey, Melissa DeLicer, Emma Ross, and I want to point out the graphics that you've seen here in the LUT. This was the part that I wasn't really expecting, and Emma Ross really kudos for her work. It was, when I saw it, I thought, we didn't talk about this till the next year, but she went ahead and did that. So it was a huge lift on her part to really bring the document closer to what our end results are. And then, of course, I'd be a big part of the vision and person who really has the componentry of putting together a CIP proper, because he's done it before, is our budget manager, Steve King. So He was great as we were walking down the path and said, well, maybe we should do this because this is more of a best practice. We should do this. So those are the folks I just really want to identify for you. Okay, so today's agenda, we'll go over the CIP. We'll get into some level of detail, each of the department heads. We'll talk about the planning process, what's new this year. I've kind of covered a little bit of that already. And then the departments will each have an opportunity to talk about theirs. We'll have a little question discussion towards the end, and then ask for board direction as we move forward towards an approval of the CIP, final approval of the CIP in April. Okay, so CIP planning process, as the chair mentioned, the initial CIP planning effort, that first bullet there was really an inventory of what do we have out there? What do we know about at the time in terms of primarily our facilities, capital projects that are coming up in the future, our IT technology projects, and our transportation. What are those? Let's get those down in a document so we at least have a 5-year horizon and we can begin to start planning and organizing our funding. From there, we move into this circular cycle that you see on the slide, that it becomes an iterative process. So each of the departments have come before the board and explained their projects. Some have had more than others, but have given the board the opportunity to review those and discuss the prioritization of those. All of that work that's been done over the last probably 6 months or so is included in this plan. We adopt an annual CIP and then we reevaluate next year. Some of the work that Laurel's team is doing with the assessment study will be incorporated into the future CIPs. As we move forward, we will do more of that kind of work to make sure that we have the best knowledge moving forward on our capital maintenance and improvement needs that we can have built into the plan.
Wait, I'm not sure I internalized that right. The facility condition index will be coming in the next iteration.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I got it right.
What's new in the 24-29 CIP? I just will read these because were written really well. Continue focus on the one Washington County approach, and really, how are we looking at all of the work we do comprehensively as a county versus department by department? Because the funding solutions for a lot of this work can cross different departments, and they involve more than just one silo or another. They're really something that we need to we'll be better as we look at this work together. Continue to work on transparency, specifically in the details, to the extent that we know a project in 5 years is going to have a little bit less transparency and less details because it's further out than one that's 2 years. Continue to work that. Update our branding charts consistent with project page design. Again, the work I explained with Emma is already ahead of the curve a little bit. And clarify some of the language so as we move forward, we're all on the same page. Future CIP process and elements, expand forecast information, and one of the kind of reflect carry forward funds. So the dollars that we receive as a funding mechanism, make sure we're lining those up to the project work, even though the project work may be in the next year or the year after. In other words, we might receive bond proceeds next year, but we won't use them the year after. So to bring that together in a standardized format. Engage others in the CIP planning process, such as OEIC and sustainability. I think each of the department heads will talk about that as we move forward. And operationalize this CIP development with dedicated staff time and resources. So right now we've been doing it as a team. We've all gotten together and told you about our quarterback and some of the guidance we've received from Steve and have evolved to this point. The question is, how do we do this moving forward? Continue to work on that. About the 5-year forecast. So we took last year's work that was in this inventory list, initial CIP, and we updated that information. We also looked at new projects, not only those that were coming on board maybe in 4 to 5 years, 5 years at the end of the CIP, but also those that might have been new that we've learned about that might be in year 2 or year 3. This helps us identify our funding needs and available resources. We've incorporated the board feedback as we've taken it in over the years, over the last year. and had discussions with the board on project priorities, funding, and financing throughout the meeting that each of the departments have had with you. With that, I'm going to sit aside and I'm going to turn it over to each of the departments, and Luke with ITS will go first.
Hello, my name is Luke Ross, and I've had the pleasure of serving as the interim CIO for the past 5 months. So I'm here to talk to you about a few of our capital improvement projects. Before I kick off on the highlights, we put our guiding principles here on the right. This comes straight from ITS's strategic plan. And it's important to just kind of look at those and see how those align with how we plan not just these capital improvements, but really any demand or any project that comes into ITS with a focus on, data-driven decisions, enterprise-level solutions, and a cloud smart approach. Some people say cloud first. We like to think cloud smart because in some cases it doesn't always make sense financially, or at least with financial stewardship in mind, to go to the cloud for everything. So that's just kind of a note there. So I'll first highlight on the one that Greg already touched on here, which is the ERP project. I don't know how much we need to go over that because I think all of you have been very involved. The one thing I will say is that, even though this is under ITS's plan and we have great project managers running this project, it really is a county-wide project. Not just IT. I guess we just get to take some of the credit for it, but
Well, somebody has to be the point person, right?
Yeah. As long as it's successful, we'll take the total. No, it will be.
It will be successful.
It will be better than we have today.
Yeah.
Therefore, it will be successful.
Yes, absolutely. And we're very excited about it. As Greg mentioned, we're replacing something that's been tried and true for 20 years, but we're excited about the capacity and ability. I know Tony is especially excited about data reporting. We are as well because we try to make data-driven decisions. Anything on that subject? I know we have a April 2nd staff update for that specifically. Are there any questions related to?
My only question on the enterprise resource planning program is I have internalized that there's the computer systems, but in order for our great employee base to be successful in using it, we have to make sure that we have processes, updated processes designed and documented. So my question is just beyond the capital, what role do we as the board of 5 need to play or would be helpful for us to play so that the wicked smart employees that are continuing to deliver the services while we have this great program going on, and then there's the go live date, right, and all that transition. My question isn't about the CIP part, but I want to make sure that my colleagues and I have the opportunity to champion the great work for the employees that are continuing to deliver the services each and every day using the quote unquote old, clunky, difficult to use system, but it is well known, right? As well as participating in that transition.
That's a great question, Chair, and I would ask that we come back to answer that on April 7th. And what you're bringing up is what we call change management.
Okay.
My non-technical way of saying this is we don't want to put garbage in to get garbage out. And so that change management, looking at our policies, practices is something that we've embedded into the structure of how we're implementing the ERP, but we'll have that conversation on April 7th and kind of lift that up and what role the board can play in that.
What's the topic, April 7th?
Or April, is it 7th or 2nd? ERP update.
Oh, great.
So we can dive in a
Thank you.
little deeper.
No,
Yep.
that's what I needed to internalize. Thank you.
I have one question under what you're referring to as the ERP system. All your subscription-based programs, which are cloud-based programs, Sabita's, in the trade, where are they all kind of going?
Are you talking about the ongoing costs for the subscription? And on the second slide, I'll touch on that a little bit because one of the things that we did is we also included the ongoing operational costs for visibility and transparency.
Not so much the operational, as Greg would know, under GASB 96, you have to capitalize those
Capitalize them, yeah.
capital costs. So I didn't know whether they're captured.
Yeah, it's captured and we put it on a line called OpEx, but really capitalized, yeah.
All right.
Anything more on just the ERP? Nope, we're good to go.
Okay, good to go. So I'll move on to the Horizons replacement. Most of you know this is our internal county employee site. Following the successful implementation of the county's website, now we get to pivot and focus on something that needs to be upgraded as well. Not only is it just technology lifecycle management as far as replacing something that's old code, it's also looking at how we service the employees and enhancing staff engagement and just really improving the system overall. So most of the costs related to this are going to be contracted costs, not as much the actual software or solution, but we thought it was important enough to highlight this as well. So
Thank you.
and then the final item on here is the phone system replacement. So today we're already laying the groundwork. A lot of our phone systems are still running on copper, which is kind of that old plug-in that most people had at their homes. We're modernizing that to the thicker Ethernet, fiber-based, modern VoIP solutions. And the work that's going on today is going to lay the groundwork for the phone system replacement and looking at something that's modern, more mobile, more cost-effective, and give us possibly solutions like Teams phones, things like that in the future. So we're really excited about this project.
Before we move on, do we have any questions on these three pieces? Nope, great. We're with you.
Okay, perfect. And then the second slide, pretty straightforward. It covers the capital costs for ERP, the Horizons upgrade, and our phone system replacement. And you can see the line, again, it'll be capitalized, but the OpEx ongoing costs in 26, 27 and beyond is looking at the ERP subscription fee and ongoing costs of the Horizon upgrade as we move the Horizons to the cloud. Any questions?
I just want to give kudos now that one of the beautiful things about the incredible volume of information in the CIP draft is the clarity of expense, the clarity of revenue and the different types of revenue, and then the collection of the revenue and the expenditure of the revenue to achieve the results, and done through actuals, forecasts, and whatnot. Very clearly done. Thank you. Commissioner Treese.
And Chair, to your point, as I was going through this and as I'm reflecting on my almost 6 years now, I didn't even know how much I needed this. I didn't know what to ask for previously. So to your point about clarity, about understanding, it's really remarkable for me. So, and that's a personal statement about the ability to sift out what the issues are for our county, what the revenue base is, what the expenses are, and how we are going to go through this through the future. It's really remarkable. And like I said, that's just for me. There are others who had a different base of understanding, but I just greatly appreciate this all the way through. Numbers are pretty big when you get down to the very end here, but that's what we do. That's exactly what we do here. So,
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I think I'm going to pass you off to one of my favorite directors to work with, Laurel Brown.
You can just stay over to the side too, in case we're going to go back to Q&A later.
so that's okay.
Well,
You can
there's a
join here.
fourth chair. Exactly.
Right at the table.
I just want to jump in and just say how grateful I am for Luke stepping into the interim role as CIO, and in his interim role presenting his first budget and working through the CIP. He's just doing a dynamic job. And this was your first board presentation too.
Nice
So,
job.
thank you.
Been here for 24 years. I've kind of dreamt about this. I think it was a dream. It was a nightmare, but
Well, I hopefully you saw through the prior topic on the cat naming that this board really seeks to understand. So it's not a, did you succeed or not, but rather helping us understand. So good job. Hi, Laurel.
Hi, again. Oh, I overshot on the mic there. I was just here on 420, and we went through a lot of detail. I'll try to keep it higher level this time so I can make room for LUT to follow. This first slide is just some facts and figures that kind of characterize our portfolio, which I think can be summarized as large and complex, largely well-maintained, but aging. And so those aging buildings and systems can outstrip our available resources. We have to prioritize as a result because we cannot do it all. The overarching driver for what we do in facilities is to focus on health and safety of the building occupants. Within that overarching priority, we are currently elevating the needs in our infrastructure, in our critical facilities infrastructure rather, sorry. We're also identifying the critical needs in many of our buildings that we need to take care of in order to preserve structural integrity in those spaces. And we are in the park side of the department working on meeting growing community demand for outdoor recreation using largely outside funding. And we are focusing on doing studies and assessments to help us improve our strategic planning and use of limited resources. So what's in the facilities plan? Altogether, we have $93 million worth of improvements that we're planning on doing in 24-25. On the facilities side, again, those are the critical facilities infrastructure projects. We're doing a number of just capital repair and refurbish projects, and then also, again, those studies. On the parks side of the house, we are largely focused on the nice capital project package that we presented earlier that include the Scoggins Valley Park overnight campground, as well as the overnight visitor center and the Tualatin Valley or Tualatin River access at Eagle Point. And then both plans include that full forecast through the next 5 years. So this is the summary table that we presented in February, not April, like I said at the beginning of this. I realized it wasn't 420, it was 220.
You're living in the future.
I am. It's a nice
for
town.
you.
Yeah. So this is our summary table that we kind of went over last time, and we have incorporated the feedback that we received on that day. If we haven't yet hit the mark, please do let us know, and we'll bring back further changes for the final version of this. It balances at the end of the 5 years, the fiscal year totals. We've clarified that each column is totaled by fiscal year, that's not a rolling balance. We tried to provide additional detail in the titles of the expenditure types and the revenue types. And we still have the $63 million of not yet secured funding that we are keeping our eye on. Any questions about the facilities?
I do, but I'm gonna hold it.
Okay, that's great. So parks is much smaller, a little more condensed. Again, you can see on the top, the parks 2024 capital projects is their biggest cost driver over the 5 years. That'll be about $9.5 million. But you can also see in the revenue that most of that is coming from the Bureau of Reclamation grant and matching funds, as well as the Metro local share. Matching funds that we have not yet identified and the Metro local share. Any questions there? Okay, so that is the end of the facilities portion, and I'll ask Stephen Roberts to join us at the table.
Morning, Commissioners. Stephen Roberts, Land Use and Transportation Director. I'll just walk through a few slides with you. And again, happy to take any questions. And I want to mention too, Russ Knoble and Jessica Pell's on our team, also really instrumental in working on the CIP document. And the folks that Greg mentioned earlier, and those two, they're really just the core team. This has passed through the hands of a whole lot of folks. Takes a real significant team to pull this information together. And I'm really pleased this year, just as Greg was mentioning earlier, with the amount of progress that we've made toward really fleshing out this document, really making it something that we hope will be much more useful to you all, to us, and to the community. And so we're very excited to keep moving forward. I think I'll just say before we even start, I think a couple of areas of ongoing practice for us are just really tightening up our asset management practices and really creating a more seamless linkage between our maintenance planning and our capital planning. We do a really good job already, but we're really just continuing to think about how we can evolve that practice and continue that work and just do better. We're always looking to do better. So just a real quick high-level overview, just to give a sense of what we're tasked with maintaining and building. So we do manage a county-wide transportation system, roads primarily, and we have over 1,300 miles of county-managed roadways, streets and roads throughout the county. Those are about half urban and about half rural. That also includes the roads that are managed by the Urban Road Maintenance District within the urban unincorporated areas. Within that system, there's 183 bridges and over 3,000 culverts that we also maintain.
Okay, question.
Yes, sir.
ITS is beginning to be a huge component of all of the costs. Are they within those buckets? So you don't have a separate ITS?
No, no. Yeah, well, maybe I can touch on that as we get a little bit further into. And that's a good point too. So we also manage an increasingly sophisticated traffic signal network and continue to work on evolving our practice in that regard as well, really trying to build a smarter traffic signal and traffic management system and make the most of the capacity that we do have on the roadways without having to add capacities. Let's see. And I did want to just mention, maybe this is a good transition into the next slide. So a lot of the capital, quote unquote, capital projects that are captured in this plan actually are maintenance projects, major maintenance in some cases, or programmatic maintenance. But because of the expenditure amounts, we've included things that are estimated to cost $250,000 or more in the plan. So a number of our maintenance activities actually hit that threshold and are incorporated in this document as well. And we thought it's just really helpful information just to kind of step back again, and you'll see that we have a number of lines of revenue sources in the document. And so it's really helpful to just step back and think about what the various revenue sources are that we utilize for our transportation system. And many of these are restricted in various ways for the types of projects or the types of expenditures that these funding sources are eligible for. So in the chart, if you can make out the background, the sort of blue portion, what I would call the left more than half, is really focused in the capital arena. The green portion on the right is really focused primarily towards the maintenance and operations of the system. And so the various funding sources, the county gas tax, state gas tax, highway fund allocation, and the county vehicle registration fee, those are all constitutionally limited to spending within county road rights of way. So those are very specific in terms of how they can be used. The transportation development tax and system development charges obviously have limitations. Those are designed to help offset transportation system demands that are created by new development, help offset some of those needs. Gain share revenues, your board adopted policies around how those funds are expended. The department receives about $2.6 million per year through the next fiscal year. And those funds are allocated toward Commissioner Rogers, you mentioned ITS. So a portion of that money goes into enhancing our ITS system. We actually use that really as leverage to try to seek other external funding to boost our capability to expend on that. And then we also have a $2 million allocation per year that really goes into helping build out safe routes to school, focused on a number of the schools in the unincorporated area. And then the last and one of the largest sources, of course, is MSTIP, Major Streets Transportation Improvement Program. Your board knows that's a general fund allocation. So that obviously remains our largest overall share of transportation funds and certainly the bulk of our capital improvement spending. And then the slices that are in orange there, we actually sort of think of those as kind of a combination of both operations and maintenance activities are funded with those sources. So the county vehicle registration fee, when your board adopted that fee, one of the areas of emphasis was really helping to improve a lot of our county culverts because we had a number of structurally deficient or functionally obsolete culverts that were becoming problematic. And so we have been spending a significant amount of that money in that regard, also using it for Americans with Accessibility or Americans with Disabilities Act, curb ramp and pedestrian signal upgrade and improvements. We also receive a small portion of what's called Surface Transportation Block Grant funds through ODOT. Those are federal funds that come to us through ODOT. Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, that's our transit funding. We are a small-time transit provider here in Washington County. And we do that in partnership with Ride Connection, who've been a fantastic partner for us. And then lastly, the Urban Road Maintenance District. So again, that is those urban unincorporated areas. The URMD is a county service district, and residents within the district pay a property tax of just under 25 cents per thousand. And that is generating right now around $6 million per year in revenues that help maintain and manage the local streets in those urban unincorporated areas. That program in particular, we've had a great run for about 12 or 13 years now of building a significant amount of sidewalk improvements within those urban unincorporated areas, many of which do not have sidewalks in many of the areas that developed a long time ago before we required those improvements. So we've made great progress in some of those areas, really helping to build out the opportunity for people to get somewhere more safely without having to get into a car. Any questions? Yes, obviously. Any questions on this before we move on? Okay. I'll apologize. I identified we had a typo here.
Oh my goodness.
I know the 150. Well, it's a numerical typo. The 152 million there actually should be 167 million for the projected FY 24-25 expenditures. So you'll see this in the table when we get there. And then, of course, then the plan is showing us also the forecasted revenues and expenditures through FY 28-29, so a total 5-year look ahead period. And I think Greg alluded to this earlier. This document is a plan. It's designed to help us, thoughtful and methodical about how we're approaching the work that we do, ensuring that we are allocating the right funds at the right time for the right work. And so the plan will, of course, evolve and change over each year. And this is a great opportunity, I think, having developed this institutional muscle, if you will, to come back to your board every year to make sure that we're reviewing and evaluating those priorities and ensuring that we're moving in the right direction. Within this plan, there are 68 identified capital projects. Yeah, it should be 69. And I would say some of those projects that are identified are actually bundles of small projects in some cases. So it's actually a larger number of total projects, but in terms of what you'll see captured in the plan, that's what's included there. So again, that includes our MSTIP projects, which is the lion's share of our capital improvement work. But as I mentioned earlier, the Safe Routes to School improvements that are funded by Gain Share, a significant amount of accessibility improvements that are being funded through Urban Road Maintenance District and the County Road Fund. The pedestrian and bicycle improvements also largely funded by the Urban Road Maintenance District, but also some through the Road Fund as well. And then we are doing a number of bridge replacements, bridge upgrades for seismic, and then just a variety of other necessary upgrades and improvements to the system. Questions here? And in the 5-year summary table, so again, someone alluded to big numbers here, and they are very big numbers. And it's a reminder that even as large as some of the numbers are, the needs that are identified in our transportation system plan and the transportation development tax project list are really, really large. And so even as we're continuing this work, we really are chipping away at a much larger future vision of what our transportation system will look like. And I would note in here too, the big bottom line total is you'll see down in the lower right corner is about $969 million, almost $1 billion. That is a big, big expenditure. In the actual 5-year look ahead, so starting with budget year 24-25, going through 28-29, that number's around $565 million. The remainder is that look back, so prior expenditures on these projects, current year proposed expenditures, and then totaling all that up, and you get close to that $1 billion. I would also point out a number of these project costs and the revenues that go with actually include a number of utility improvements. So one of the things that we do as a standard practice, we coordinate really closely with all of our city partners, Tuolumne Valley Water District, Willamette Water Supply, Clean Water Services, and identify as we're planning roadway projects, we try to make sure that we're being very clear and transparent about the timing of those potential improvements, that we coordinate with all of our utility partners. They often would like for us to upgrade their infrastructure. We bundle those utility improvements into our road improvement contracts. So it inflates the expenditure, but it also brings additional revenue back to the county as a service to our partners.
You do it with other utilities too, like Northwest Natural and PGE, so that whole right of way is managed.
Yes, those folks don't pay us and we don't pay them. So that's
But you do
but
touch base.
we
you do
absolutely
coordinate.
yes,
So
absolutely.
that's why I wanted to.
Yes,
that
those
to light.
don't affect our bottom line, so to speak, in terms of what you see on the plan here. But yes, that is really important work as well. Let's see, and I would say I kind of alluded earlier to some of the smaller projects that we are doing, and I think the big projects, obviously, those are the ones that probably get the most attention, cost the most money, take up a lot of airtime, if you will. But I would just reiterate a lot of those smaller projects that are captured in the plan here, those sidewalks we're building in the urban road maintenance district, those accessibility improvements. Those are the ones that I think have the most sometimes direct and immediate impact and benefit to people in the community. So all of this work is so important to us, and we really, I'm just honored really to be a part of doing this work. It really is, I think, something that I really value and look forward to continuing. So, any questions on this? Mike?
At the first meeting where we were talking about the CP, we were asking about what kinds of capital improvements would be included. I was asking what the threshold was, because it's kind of a threshold question, not fun, but it is, to know where you start. And Greg got back to me and said that it was $5,000 minimum for a project. And I'm seeing here $2,000 in the chart out in some years. So is there a limit that you have by department, or is it across the board?
Well, there's $5,000 of expenditure. The $2,000 is revenue.
But what? Okay, I recognize that part, but why would you show the 2,000 if you're not showing the expenditure side? Just because you're just showing us what's going on?
Which page are you?
We're on this page.
Oh, yeah, the one that's in front. I'm looking at this. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of an overall, that's a 1-year line item for a continual project. So the 1 year might be $2,000 or $1,000 or $500, but overall the project is bigger.
We're using a 5,000 cap rate though, for CIP.
No, we're really focusing on 50 and above, which is different than
250,000? Okay.
which is I know what the question you're asking in terms of a capitalization, at what level do we capitalize expenses versus operationalize expenses? For accounting purpose, that's 5,000. But for the CIP, we're really focusing on the much bigger picture, longer term. So we've set a number at about 250.
So in lay terms, you've got a threshold of 250 and above for your CIP, which will not equate to what your asset register will be.
Exactly.
Much different.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the asset register will be much larger.
For any community members who may be listening, where when we toss around 250, we really mean 250,000. Even though we don't say it, it's part of our vernacular.
But the key issue here is the difference between a CIP and the definition of a capital project. And CIP is knowing what the bogey is out there. And that's, I think that I'm keeping that in mind as I look forward.
And I think I can provide a link here too. So under 250, typically those are a collection of capitalized expenses that will be part of a recurring annual budget process. So we'll see those over and over again. What we're really trying to identify in the CIP, the long-term CIP, are those big ones out there that are going to need, that we wouldn't normally have a funding mechanism for. And so it allows us to see it coming and plan. It's bigger than what we would normally see on an annual basis.
And this is part of our management tool versus a accounting and fiduciary responsibility tool. So I think you got your questions taken care of?
It was perfect. Yeah, I just wondered what happens on the cliff tier where you have a whole bunch of things under 250 that you have to anticipate. Do you ever build that into your CIP budget?
If we got to that point and it was an issue, yes, we would. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But the county is large enough that my expectation is that over the years, it'll flatten out. Just the law of big numbers. I think we'll be okay at that 250. Yeah.
So I'm holding my detailed questions for after, but there is one for me to ask now on this slide. Under revenue, your top two line items, MSTIP and MSTIP 3F. And so I would just like to point out that just the label MSTIP is a little unclear. So I think that needs a little bit of work.
Yes, and
There's a lot that's been happening and that is programmed out. And I understand the different pieces, the what I call the UGB expansion areas, that's the cost share program and whatnot. So I recognize it's all in there. But as we're showing summary tables, it just begs a question. And I want to make sure that there's sufficient information so that viewers outside of us as county experts, so to speak, right inside baseball, that it's clear for them.
thank you. And you reminded me, Chair, one of the points that I looked over was also wanting to be clear. So when in the MSTIP line item, that really is the MSTIP 3D, 3E, and bonding cost sharing programs. And then MSTIP 3F, that is an assumption. We'll be back to your board in about a month to talk about a funding package and priorities for the MSTIP 3F. So we've programmed in certain assumptions in this.
Yep.
And for planning purposes. And so we'll be back to talk with your board more about that specific line item here in the next month or so.
Well, and so maybe it's a matter of putting MSTIP 3F-TBD, right? Because we haven't adopted it yet.
That's right.
Whereas everything in missteps already adopted. I hadn't thought of that till just now. Thank you. And I followed all your abbreviations.
Okay.
They're very obvious. Kudos. Thank you.
Okay, I get the last slide here. So what is the CIP? Well, it supports these bullet points that we talk about quite a bit, coming together as one county, operating as one county, working together as one county, our internal services supporting one county effort. And it gives us this long-term look. facilities, transportation, information technology. So we don't have any surprises. And I would say, to me, what this one slide tells me is stability. Just long-term stability, no surprises, long runway to plan. We can keep things moving as they should. I would just summarize that. And with that, I would turn it back over and ask if you have any questions before we move forward.
Commissioners, reminder, the next step following this whole presentation and our policy questions, the intention is for us to be approving the CIP as a standalone and document entity on April 23rd. And all of its financials are incorporated into the proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget. So who would like to start first on the policy questions?
Don't have any questions. You've answered.
Yippee! Score!
Unless you want me to make some up.
No, that's awesome. Okay, I can't contain myself. I just need to take a brief pause. Could you go back one slide? Way to downplay the accomplishment. This is huge. I am so proud of the team. I can't contain my excitement and my gratitude for this. You've earned a chair happy dance, right? So I'm really trying to contain myself, and I just couldn't hold it in any longer.
What does that look like?
Just did it.
There's two definitions of chair, the role and sitting. It's a
My
chair
sitting
dance.
happy dance, okay? Doesn't always have to be standing.
Right.
Okay, thank you for that brief pause. Now we will resume the district commissioners going first. So, I mean, it goes to the point that Commissioner Rogers didn't have any questions. Way to knock it out of the park, folks. This is a huge amount of work. Anyway, I will contain myself now. Commissioners.
I made pretty strong statement earlier about the importance of this to me as I look to develop handles on our expenses, on our revenue base and all those pieces. That's my goal as a commissioner, just make sure that I can understand, I can grasp, and I can then make policy decisions based on that awareness. So this is, and I'll use the term I used earlier, remarkable to me because it really gives me a very clear focus and the understanding difference between the accounting side and the project side and the importance of separating those two so that we can address the public need. And that's what I see here is having the tool to address the public need as we move forward. So I don't have any questions. I said earlier, the numbers are big and that, that's 1.2 billion, but that's the reality of what it is that we're looking at into the future. And that's what our public needs to understand as well. So I'm very pleased with this as well. And like I said, it's helped me grow as a commissioner and I really appreciate it. So I don't have any questions. I think that it's very well done.
Thank you.
Appreciate the input from all of you.
Just to help with that the concept of handle really kind of sunk in my mind. And here's maybe another way to look at this is we've spent so much time on our annual operating budget. That's what we do every year. We have we have laws around them. We actually have to produce a budget. So we spend energy on that area. The other two areas that we haven't spent time on, if you think of it as a stool, one is long-term capital planning, which is this. And the other one is the impacts of one-year budget decision. What does that one-year decision impact us in 3 years? Yeah. So as we continue to build our capacity to do exactly as you were asking and put this handle on it, we'll have those three legs. And if we've got that, I think we've got it. We've got that sort of long-term idea about what's going to look like. Thanks.
Well, I'm very, like I said, very appreciative and, my brain is still kind of doing this. It's almost there.
I don't have a question for you, Greg. Just a quick comment to say you've come a long way. I remember the first day you came to talk to us about the CIP. I think the chair was on Zoom. I remember sitting here and I think all of us reacted, spreadsheet that you put in front of us to have that first initial conversation. So you've come a long way, you and your team, and you're almost at the finish line. So look forward to that final discussion to finally stamp Washington County's first CIP plan. Good work so far. Yeah.
So if we could go to the policy question slide. So I'm hearing that my three colleagues here at the table don't have any questions or comments with regard to being able to adopt this in April. And I haven't heard them express any informational needs leading up to that next step. So thank you, colleagues. I would like to say really excellent work. These are really good summaries and explanations, including the phase that we're in, the cost estimates. Thank you, with 2 exclamation points. I also appreciate the maps as well as the photos, right? Not everything's about a location. Just really made the document readable, transparent. Your goals, you swung it out of the park, over the fences. How am I doing? I'm using my analogies. The revenue and expense clarity is just terrific. What a gift. What an absolute gift. So I am on board for the next step of adoption. That being said, I have 11 detailed questions that I am not going to bore this whole room of people with.
You want to see our happy dance?
I'll invite that. I'm hoping that we might get through our full agenda a little early today. So sorry, I have, of my 11 questions, 10 of them are on transportation related items. Sorry, Stephen, no surprise, but I think you and I alone will be able to knock these down really easily. They're all easy. One of them is facilities in general. And so I think I'll ask it now. So I appreciate the work that the board before us, and that includes Commissioner Rogers, did to work on seismic retrofit of some buildings. And I don't know, there isn't a phraseology that I've been influenced or that I've been taught to refer to those. But in my mind, I label them as the PSB, the Walnut Street Center, and the Law Enforcement Center as the key critical ones, so that if a major earthquake happens, we'll be able to go from that immediate response towards supporting community recovery, right? Because I think about the LUT inspectors that are going to have to go out and look at roads, bridges, culverts, buildings. Are they inhabitable, right? How our emergency operations team will function, right? That's part of what the law enforcement center has. So I don't know in the CIP what label to use for that subset. Now, of course, all of our buildings, we want our employees to be able to get safely out of the building. So I don't know as you move through with facilities condition index, for example, what label to use for that. So I don't need to have the answer to this question in order to adopt the CIP. But having the opportunity of this comprehensive document has led me to have that question.
Thank you for that question. So I think when we're talking about seismic resiliency, the county has been fairly proactive and years ago had done a comprehensive survey of all of our buildings. The ones that you listed, the PSB, LEC, and Walnut Street Center were identified as being most at risk, I will say. And so those have been prioritized. We did the first two very successfully. They are upgraded to the point where they will stand and people, we hope they will stand. I mean, it's hard to say anything with certainty, but that they are built to that standard to stand so that people can exit the building safely. They are not built to operate the day after, but that we'll have an easier time getting them operational because they're standing. Walnut Street Center is the next one on the list, and where I have placed that in our capital improvement plan right now is still a little too far out for my comfort, and I'm hoping that if we can materialize funding, we can pull that in closer because there are other needs in that same bucket of seismic resilience. We are currently working with a contractor to refresh our examination of those buildings because the standards and the codes have changed. And most importantly, I think our understanding of what the local earthquake would look like has changed since we had those original assessments. So that's something that will be really developing over the next year or two is a more current understanding and a plan to address those.
I don't know if I've given you the opportunity to understand where I'm coming from. So as one of the founding elected officials to the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, we, as part of our knowledge-based growing, and Commissioner Treese is the board rep there now, we had an invited speaker who was a commissioner from Napa County. And we were specifically thinking about seismic, but they had just gone through not only a seismic event, but also a wildfire. So I can't remember the commissioner's name. She did a marvelous job of helping us appreciate how they had to acquire the use of some buildings so that they could satisfy state law so that all employees could continue to get paid. So that's where, Ms. Angie, we need to make sure all of our IT, HR, payroll systems can still function and the certifiably smart people can do that, right? Because that's part of our employee-based recovery. And then some surprising things in terms of emergency operations and the level of appreciation that I have now for how dependent we will be on the inspections team for us to figure out, after that chaos of 2 weeks to 3 months, how do we get our collective senses together? So, like I said, I don't need to understand this to adopt this first ever comprehensive CIP, but I know that it will help the board in the next 2.5, 3 years to have a CIP that helps us understand our responsibility in being proactive for that future stability and what's the word, ability to help our community recover. And
In response to that, when Mr. Ross comes back with the ERP update, he can touch on how the solution we're moving to provide such resilience in the time of a disaster.
terrific. Thank you. Don't worry, she's not moving the bar up on you. Rather, she's giving us the assurance that our various interests and curiosities will be satisfied in the upcoming agenda item. So like I said, I join my three colleagues in being ready, able, and willing to adopt this per your next step plans in April. And Mr. Roberts and I will knock these 10 details. So we've got all those base hits. Terrific. Thank you again, team. Just
Thank you all.
delighted. Okay, well, look at us. We are way ahead of schedule today. Yay, us. So let me ask, we do want about the order of the agenda. Do we want to consider, or we're going to take a break for 15 minutes. That would bring us to 10 minutes to 11. So during the break, Ms. Angie and Mr. Anderson, could you convene and answer the question, should we press on with the executive session being our next item and then 1 o'clock time certain on the CIP, or change it around? So SIP, thank you.
We were actually just conversing, so let us huddle with staff and
Yes.
take the break, and we'll come back with a solution.
Great. So see everybody back here at 10 minutes to the hour.
I was thinking that.